You just pirated, bought Adobe Premiere Pro, and you're like, whoa, look at all these buttons here. So confusing. How do I make a video? I've edited over 300 videos in Premiere, and in this video, I'll make a video from start to finish using it and try to show you how to do it too. By the end, you should be able to import footage, create a sequence, cut up your clips, apply effects, fix your audio, do some animations, and export your video with the best settings for YouTube, and do it all fast by using keyboard shortcuts. Now, knowing how to use a video editing software and knowing how to edit are two different things. There are a lot of people that know how to use Premiere but don't know how to edit. So I'm also going to sprinkle in some tips for making videos specifically for YouTube. So even if you know how to use Premiere already, this video might still be a good watch. Let us begin. Once you start up Premiere Pro, you should see something similar to this. On the left, you'll be able to click New Project. Here it's asking me where I want to save it, so I'll choose my desktop and I'll name the project First Video. Here I can also select what things I want to import into the project. For example, this screen recording that I'm going to use, but I usually never do it from here. And once everything looks nice, create. Boom, we are in. The first thing you'll probably notice is that my Premiere looks different from your Premiere. And that's because this layout is dynamic. You can pick up every single panel and move it anywhere else. Or you can click this little X and close any panel that you don't want to see. So I can just close out everything. I'm left with this, just one panel that I can't even... Oh, I can. That's interesting. But when you first open it, it will probably look something like this. Boom. And this is really cool because you can set up your own working environment. If there's a panel you don't like, you can simply right click and close. For example, the info panel, get out of here. Or the markers panel, or the history panel. I don't need those. And I can also resize everything however I want. So if I want more space for the timeline window, I can just extend it like so. Now what happens if you close a panel that you actually want? I want the timeline panel. That's where I'll be editing the video. If you want to retrieve a panel, you can always go into Window and select it here. There's a little check mark on the ones that are already visible. So I can find the timeline panel down here and it reappears. But all of this is still pretty blank. There's no video, and that's because we need to import it. So here on my desktop, I have a screen recording and I'm going to pick it up and bring it into Premiere. Now, not all of the panels will let me drag it in. For example, if I try to drag it in here, it doesn't let me. Only the timeline panel and the project panel will let me import media. It even says it here, import media to start. So I'm going to drag it in here. Oink. Now to be able to edit this file, I'm going to drag it into the timeline window, which will create a new sequence. You can see that a bunch of things just spawned in. And the sequence is essentially a new video that you're making inside of Premiere. And you can even see that in the project panel, where all of your files live, there's a new thing that appeared, a new sequence, and you can tell that by the logo. It has this logo, and different media files, like the screen recording, have this logo. Very nice. Now what Premiere did here was essentially copy everything from your clip and pasted it to this video here, this sequence, which means that the video that we're making, the sequence, has the same screen dimensions, has the same FPS. But what if I want my output video to be different from my input video? I can go into Sequence and click Sequence Settings. Here I can configure a bunch of things about my sequence, about the video that I'm editing right now. For example, I can set the FPS inside time base. And for this video, I'll choose 30 FPS. Here in the frame size, I can choose how large my video is. So right now it's 1440p. But let's say I want to save space and export this video in 1080p resolution. In that case, I can just come here and say 1920 by 1080p. And this will update the resolution of my sequence. I'll click OK and it changed. And did you notice what happened here? This clip actually zoomed in because this clip is now bigger than the sequence because I made the sequence smaller. So how do I now get it back to normal size? The first way is to double click inside of this clip. I'll move it to the side so I can see the sides and resize it like this. I can hold Command or Control on my keyboard and I can then extend it like so. But this is not extremely efficient. I'm going to undo what I just did with Command Z or Control Z on Windows, and we're back here. Now, if you want to move or in any other way manipulate a clip on the screen, you always do it from within the Effect Controls panel. Whoa, a bunch of numbers just appeared. Don't worry, we'll go through each one. Each one of these groups is an effect that you can control, and you can even collapse these like so. And these are all default effects that come with every single clip. They're like the motion, the opacity, or how visible the clip is, and things like the volume if the clip has audio. Oh look, there's been an update. Anyway, our mission now is to make sure that this clip fits nicely on the screen and it's not zoomed in. And for that, inside of the Effect Controls panel, I will have to control the Motion Effect group. Here, the first control that I find is the position, and it has the horizontal and vertical values. So for example, if I pick up this clip here and start moving it around, you can see that those numbers start changing. And to reset them back to default, I can hit this reset arrow. But if I do the same for scale, it still stays at 100%. That's because this clip is just bigger than my sequence, because I made the sequence smaller before. So in order to make this clip fit, I have to size it down. Now, one way I can do this is just click inside here and type in a different number, or an easier way is to hover over a number. You can do this with all numbers in Premiere and simply click and drag left or right. And you can see the scale of the clip changes on the right. And 75% is the sweet spot. Anyway, so now we have the screen recording fit the screen. Next, let's come into the timeline window and hold Option or Alt on Windows and scroll in order to zoom in. Now, one thing to note is that it zooms in wherever your mouse cursor is. So if I want to zoom in into this spot, I can position my mouse cursor here, hold Alt or Option, and it will zoom into this part. If I want to zoom into the beginning, I can put my mouse cursor here and scroll, and it will zoom into this part. And now I want to preview the video and see what it is, so I can cut something out. In order to start the playback, I'll press space. Boom. Okay, so we don't need this first entire half until I say boom. So to cut it out, we can use the razor tool. I can pick it up from here, and whenever I hover over my clip, you can see it showing where it's going to add a cut once I click with my mouse. And here it's split these two clips. You probably noticed that I already switched to my move tool from the razor tool by using a keyboard shortcut. And you can either switch tools from here on the left, which is insanely inefficient because you'll be going back and forth with your mouse every single time that you want to switch to a new tool, or you can do it by hitting a key on your keyboard. So to switch to the move tool, you can press V, and if you hover over a tool, it will actually tell you the keyboard shortcut. So if I'm using the razor tool and I want to quickly switch to the move tool, I can press V and then start selecting the clips. For almost all things that you'll do inside of the timeline, you'll probably want to use this tool, the default arrow tool, because with it, you can select and delete clips and move things around. Now let's undo everything. So now I want to remove this clip, and in order to do that, I first have to select it, and then I can click delete on my keyboard, and it's gone. Another way I could have gotten rid of this was to pick up this clip and simply move it over this clip. In Premiere, if you take a clip and move it over another clip, it will actually delete the clip that was underneath and leave a gap. So be careful not to accidentally do this because it will leave gaps. Now I'll undo everything with Command or Control Z, and I'll simply delete it by selecting and clicking delete. Now another thing is that in Premiere, spaces act just like clips as well. So instead of selecting this clip and dragging it with my mouse to the left, what I can do instead is select the space and delete the space. If there's a space in between two clips and I select it and delete it, it will join these clips together. Beautiful. Now you probably saw me cutting the clip like this without using the razor tool. And that's because there is a keyboard shortcut for splitting a clip. And it's much faster than using your mouse, coming to the razor tool, then using the razor tool to cut something out, then coming back, switching to the move tool, and then deleting the clip. You can simply do it with a keyboard shortcut. So to find all the keyboard shortcuts that are available in Premiere, you can go up here into Premiere Pro and select keyboard shortcuts. Option Command K or Alt Control and K on Windows. So I'll do that instead because it's cool. This is currently my preset and a lot of keyboard shortcuts are customized, but these are the default ones. And when you highlight any of the modifier keys, it will actually show you what keyboard shortcuts are available once you press down the key. So for example, Command Z will undo or Command X will cut. Now, in order to add a cut, the keyboard shortcut is Command K. It's called Add Edit. So if I come over this clip and press Command K, it will split it right here. There's also a very important setting here under sequence and selection follows playhead. Make sure this is toggled on, because if it's not, then wherever you move your playhead, this thing is called the playhead, it will not select the clip underneath. So now this clip is still selected even though my playhead is here. And in order to add a cut or see the effect controls of the clip that you're hovering over, you have to have the clip selected. And so in order to not to have to do this every time and select with your mouse, you can go into sequence and selection follows playhead, which will automatically automatically select the clip that you're hovering over. And so now if I want to add a cut here, I can just click Command K on my keyboard, which will split here. I don't have to go here and pick my cut tool or the razor tool. Okay, now another thing that I always do with my videos is edit based on the audio waveform, because it's super easy to see where I begin or end my sentence based on the audio waveform. But by default, you can't really see it well enough. So what you can do is come here and expand this audio track so that the audio waveform becomes bigger. And also, if I come here in the middle, I can just move it up so it's more centered on the screen. Now I can clearly see where I begin my sentence and where I end my sentence. And here there's just empty space that I can cut out. So once again, let's go to the beginning and play through this video. Boom, in order to change your display settings on Windows, you go into Okay, it seems like I've messed up here a bunch of times and the actual video starts here. So I want to cut out all of this. To do that, I need to add a cut here, Command K. Then I'll select this clip, click delete, select the space and click delete once again. And let's look at the video now. Boom, in order to change your screen's refresh rate on Windows, you right click and choose display settings. Then you go into advanced display and here under choose a refresh rate, you choose the highest one possible. I've made another mistake here, so I'll come here, add a cut, add another cut here, select the clip, and now instead of deleting it and then selecting the space and deleting the space, I can actually do something called ripple delete. What ripple delete does is it automatically deletes a clip between two cuts and closes the space that it was taking up. So if I ripple delete, you can see that the space and the clip immediately go away, and everything that was to the right moved to the left. The keyboard shortcut for ripple delete is Option Delete or Alt Delete on Windows. So if I come here and click Option Delete, it will delete that clip and delete the space that that clip was taking over. It's super useful to memorize this keyboard shortcut so that you don't have to delete the space every single time. You can just ripple delete and the space is gone. And you don't even need to memorize anything. After you've used the keyboard shortcut like 10 or 15 times, it will automatically write itself into your muscle memory and then you'll just hit it by default without having to think about it. So investing just a little time to remember it for the first few times until you get used to it is so worth it, because for the rest of the times that you'll edit videos, you'll be able to use that keyboard shortcut, which will save you a lot of time. And especially if you're learning how to edit videos for YouTube, your editing speed will be insanely important, because if you want to start a YouTube channel, it's just a numbers game in the beginning. You usually have to make at least 10 or 50 videos to learn what doesn't work and start doing what works. And if you know how to edit fast, you can fail a lot faster and get rid of those first 10 to 50 videos that are required to learn what not to do, so you can start doing what works and growing your channel. So the more keyboard shortcuts you use, the faster you'll be able to edit each video, which will increase your rate of learning on YouTube, and you'll be able to grow a lot faster because you'll do more experiments and learn what doesn't work faster than other people. Anyway, let's continue. Under choose a refresh rate, you choose the highest one possible. This will make everything on your screen super smooth. This will make everything on your screen buttery smooth. Okay, so here I decided to say buttery smooth instead of super smooth, so I want to leave this in. This will make everything on your screen buttery smooth. I'll add a cut at the end with Command K and delete this clip by selecting and clicking delete, and then I'll add another cut here, and this is the part that I want to use for the end of my short video. Let's listen for where I want to move this part into. You choose the highest one possible. This will make everything on here. I want to add a cut here, then delete everything in the middle with ripple delete. Remember, it's Option Backspace to delete this clip and also delete the space that it takes up. Boom. Now, sometimes you might want to preview your video in full screen. One way to do that is to click this here, which will full screen the video, and you'll be able to see it in full screen. But there is another way, and it's actually a great feature in Premiere, and it lets you maximize whichever panel that you want. For example, if I want to maximize my timeline, I can do that. If I want to maximize this, the program monitor, I can also do that. If I want to do it for effect controls, I can do that as well. And in order to do that, you have to hit this symbol on your keyboard, the squiggly line or the tilde key. It's usually here right next to the 1 key or here right next to the shift key. And once you do that, it will maximize whichever panel is under your mouse cursor. So now my cursor is on the timeline and it maximizes the timeline. And now it's on the project panel and it will maximize the project panel. So I can also use this key to preview my video. Boom, in order to change your screen's refresh rate on Windows, you right click and choose display settings, then you go into advanced display, and here under choose a refresh rate, you choose the highest one possible. This will make everything on your screen buttery smooth. Now at the end here, I heard that the word smooth kind of got cut off. Buttery smooth. And so now I want to extend this clip. In order to do that, I can come to the edge of the clip, which will turn my cursor into this red thing, and I can click and expand the clip like so. In Premiere, if you cut off a clip and delete the end, that part doesn't disappear. You can always get it back by doing this. Now it works the other way around too. If you want to make a clip shorter, you can come to the other end and simply drag left. And now it should sound okay. Buttery smooth. Beautiful. Once again, I'm zooming out by holding Option and scrolling with my mouse. If you're using a trackpad, you can zoom in by pinching out with 2 fingers or zoom out by pinching in with 2 fingers. Alternatively, you can use this scroll bar at the bottom. It's kind of finicky to get used to, but if you pick up one of these handles and drag them left, it's going to zoom in into your playhead, and if you pick it up and drag it out, it's going to zoom out. But when I typically zoom in and out, it's usually with my mouse or the trackpad. Okay, now we have the base video ready, but it's kind of boring. Let's make it a little more je ne sais quoi. So first things first, you'll notice that the screen resolution of this display is kind of big, so it's hard to see something, especially for someone who might be watching on their phone. They would see maybe something like this, pretty much just a white blob. And when making videos, it's generally a good idea to think about the viewer. My goal with every video is to make the video as frictionless to watch as possible, which means that if I can do something that will make the video easier to watch, I try to always do it. The problem when you first start out making videos is figuring out what those things are. What things make a video easier and frictionless to watch? One of those things is, if you have a screen recording like this, is zooming in on the important parts. Because if someone's watching on their phone, they're not going to see anything. So let's try to zoom in. Boom, in order to change your screen's refresh rate on Okay, there in the beginning, I could zoom into here. I could zoom into the place which says display settings so that the viewer can clearly see where I'm clicking. By the way, I'm just zooming in on the preview and not the actual video. You can simply come to your program monitor and scroll on your scroll wheel to zoom in or zoom out. It doesn't do anything to the video itself. It's just zooming in on the preview for you to see. And if you want to move this preview, you can't actually pick it up and drag it anywhere. In order to pick up and drag the preview, you have to do it by clicking the middle mouse button on your mouse, by clicking the scroll wheel. If I click the scroll wheel, I can now move the preview around. Now, if you want to reset the zoom amount, you don't have to scroll all the way out. You can come here and choose fit, and it will fit it back to full screen. So let's actually zoom in inside of the video. Remember before we used the motion attributes inside of the effect controls panel to change the zoom amount of this clip. So if I increase this, it will zoom in, and if I decrease this, it will zoom out. But if I just change this number, the entire clip will become zoomed in. But what I want to do is start out like this, and then when I right click in the video, only then I want to zoom in. And for that, I will use keyframes. Now, keyframes essentially let you transition between two different states of an effect. For example, up until here in my video, I want my scale to be 75. And let's say I want to zoom in over this long. So from here to here, I want my scale to change from 75 to maybe 150. And I can use keyframes to do that. So I'll come here in my clip and click this little clock next to scale, which adds a keyframe. You can see this little diamond here. It's a keyframe. Now I'll come back here and move a little bit to the right to where I want the zoom in to end. Then I'll add another diamond and increase this amount, which zooms in. Now look at what happens to this clip if I play it. Boom, in order to change your screen's it zoomed in super fast. So in the beginning, the scale of this clip was 75 up until it came to this point. Then in between these two keyframes, the scale transitioned from 75 to 267. And from this keyframe onward, the scale stayed at 267. So essentially what we did here was say that here, the clip's scaling should be 75%. Then it should transition from 75% into 267%. And then it should stay stay at 267%. Now you probably already noticed that this is the same as my clip. If I move my playhead on the timeline, the playhead moves over here. It's just bound to this clip, so I can't really go out of bounds. If I select another clip, this becomes the timeline of that other clip. And if I want to add keyframes here and zoom in as well, I can also do that for this clip. But I'm not sure that I want keyframes on this clip, and so to remove them, I can hit this clock icon again and click OK, and it will remove all the keyframes. Now, no matter what I do to the scale, it will not change as the clip is playing. The scale will always stay the same. So if I set it to 57, it will be 57 across this whole clip. If you're new to video editing, this concept might be confusing, so throughout this whole video, we're going to go through more examples which will help you understand keyframes better. And so let's actually start with an example. I've reset everything and let's zoom in on display settings here. Now, one more tip for reducing friction for someone that's watching the video is to zoom in wherever the viewer is already looking. So the relative position of that thing that you're zooming into shouldn't change. Here's what I mean. I'm going to show you two clips and you tell me which zoom in felt better to look at. Number one, boom, in order to change your screen's refresh rate on Windows. This is number two. Boom, in order to change your screen's refresh rate. The second one was probably a lot easier to see because the position of display settings, the thing that I was zooming into, didn't change its relative position on the screen. So if I enable guides here, don't worry about what this is yet, you can see that as the zoom in is happening, display settings stay in the same place. Whereas in the first example, display settings was here on the screen, and after the zoom in, they're right there. So especially because I'm zooming in so fast, the viewer's eyes can't adjust and look over there. So they're left looking over here, and now they have to find where to look on the screen, and this just adds unnecessary friction. So whenever you're zooming into something, especially if the zoom in is very fast, try to make sure that the thing that you're zooming into doesn't change its position on the screen before and after the zoom in, so that the viewer doesn't have to move their eyes and look everywhere to find the action that's happening. Anyway, you probably noticed me use guides for this, and it's this button here. If you don't see it, you can click this plus icon and a bunch of different hieroglyphs will appear, and you can pick up this icon and drag it down here. Now, what you'll also need is this icon to show rulers, because in order to create guides, I'm going to remove my guides. You first need to enable the rulers, and then with your mouse, you can pick up one of the rulers and spawn in a guide. I usually use two guides like this to make sure that when I'm doing a zoom in, I position it exactly on the thing that I want to zoom into. And so after I make the zoom in, I can know that it shouldn't be like this, but it should be like this for the best viewing experience. Anyway, let me reset this back once again, and let's go a little slower. So right now I want to zoom in into display settings, which is over here on the screen. So inside of my video, I'm going to come to a place where I right click, which is right here. And then I'm going to add a keyframe for scale because I'm going to be zooming in. And I'm also going to add a keyframe for position because if I only change the scale, the display settings end up over there. That means I will also want to change the position of my clip to make the display settings end up over here. Let's undo everything again. Next, I'll move slightly to the right and add two more keyframes. Now, since I didn't change anything about these keyframes, I just added them. I can add however many I want. Nothing actually happens to the clip. There's no zooming or no movement because these keyframes are the same. The first keyframes have a scale of 75 and this position, and the next keyframes have the same size or the scale and the same position. But if I come to these keyframes by holding shift, you can see both of these diamonds light up blue. If I'm not on the keyframes, they're not blue, which means if I change something, it will add one more keyframe. So you want to make sure that you're on the keyframes that you want to change. You can hold shift and your playhead will snap on those keyframes. So I want to go from 75 scale to something like 182 scale. And now for the position, I'm going to use guide. So this is where I had display settings on my screen before, and after the zoom in, I want them to end up in the same place. So now I'm going to change this number, which changes the vertical movement of the clip, and I'm going to drag it left to move my clip up. So now here's what will happen to our clip. It will start off at this position and scale 75 until the playhead reaches this position. And then in between these two keyframes, the scale will transition from 75 to 182 and the position will transition from 540 to 380. And this is what we'll get. Boom, in order to change your screen's refresh rate on Windows. Now, if I want to make the zoom in faster, in this case I do, I can simply select either of these keyframes and move them closer together. So now the zoom in will happen over a shorter period of time. Boom, in order to change your screen's, maybe even shorter. Boom, in order to change your screen's refresh rate on Windows. Okay, now at this point, not everything is visible on the screen, so I want to slightly zoom out. To do that, I will add 2 more keyframes, which will save the current position and the scale. By the way, you can do this with every effect, like rotation or opacity, if you want to gradually transition from one value to another. So if I wanted to make this clip less visible, I would toggle keyframes for opacity, then I would move to the right and decrease the opacity, which will automatically add another keyframe because I enabled keyframes, and now this clip will become less visible gradually because I added keyframes. Let me reset the clock and reset the opacity back to 100, and so now I want to slightly zoom out. So I'll move slightly to the right by pressing the right arrow key on my keyboard, and here I want to add 2 more keyframes and slightly zoom out so that it transitions from this scale, from the current scale, into something like this. I'll also adjust the position so that everything I'm showing on the screen becomes visible. Boom, in order to change your screen's refresh rate on Windows, you right click and choose display settings, then you go into advanced display, and here under choose a refresh rate, you choose the highest. Whoa, what happened here? As soon as a new clip began, the scale and the position reset because I was only changing these things on this clip. And here a new clip began, which means that it has its own motion, scale, and everything else that I also need to configure. Now I want the scale of this clip here and here to be exactly the same. And there are a couple of ways to copy this over. The first way is I can simply select the last keyframes and hit Command or Control C on my keyboard to copy them, then come to this clip and paste them here with Control or Command V. This just pasted in the last keyframes of this clip that have this position and scale, and so the position and scale of this clip became the same. And since there are no more other keyframes that would change the scale or position, the scale and position does not change across this whole entire clip. Let's see it from here. Play, and here under choose a refresh rate, you choose the highest one possible. This will make everything on your screen. Oh, here another clip began and everything also reset because once again, this clip has its own motion, rotation, scale, position, and everything else. So I need to copy the scale and position from this clip over to this clip. Now, the second way to do this is to right click on the clip that you want to copy attributes from and click copy, or simply select the clip and click Command or Control C. Then come to the other clip, right click and choose paste attributes. Alternatively, you can use a keyboard shortcut Control-Shift-V or Command-Option-V on Mac, and the paste attributes window will open. Here what Premiere is asking me is what kind of attributes or effects do I want to paste from this clip over to this clip. And right now only the motion and volume are selected. I don't really want to paste the volume, so I'm going to deselect it. And the only effect group that I want to paste is motion, because the position and scale are under the motion effect group. So I'm essentially telling Premiere to paste everything that's inside of motion. So when I click OK, it will copy the motion attributes from this clip over to this clip, and this clip will become zoomed in. You can also see that the keyframes appeared over here, even though they weren't here before. Now, I don't really need to have these keyframes here because there's just one pair of keyframes. So what I can do is click on these clocks and simply disable the keyframes, which will change nothing about the clip. If I have a pair of empty keyframes, it's the same as having no keyframes, because I need the second pair to tell Premiere that I want to transition from one pair to another, for example, like so. Now Premiere will transition between these two keyframes. So from this position and scale to this position and scale. Okay, let me go back to the first keyframes and click the clock icon to remove them so that the scale and position stay the same across the entire clip. And we've successfully zoomed into this video. Let's see how it looks like now. Boom, in order to change your screen's refresh rate on Windows, you right click and choose display settings, then you go into advanced display, and here under choose a refresh rate, you choose the highest one possible. This will make everything on your screen buttery smooth. Beautiful. But I still feel that this video is kind of dry. It's very simple. We can still spice it up a little bit. For example, when I say this will make everything on the screen buttery smooth, we can nicely animate butter coming up on the screen. So first, let's find a picture of butter. Butter PNG. The reason I'm typing in PNG is because PNG files can have a transparent background, background, and I don't really want to use any other software to remove the background, so I'll try to find an image of butter with an already transparent background. If it has this checkered board in the background, it usually means it's a transparent background. I'm going to right click and choose Save Image As and save it on my desktop. Beautiful. Then I'll come onto my desktop, pick up the butter image and import it straight into my sequence. Now you'll notice that this image doesn't have a background, which is very nice, and that the scale of the butter is 100 by default. But if I decrease the size of the actual image to something like 500 pixels, I'll call this butter 2, and import it again into Premiere, you'll notice that the second picture is very small. So every time that I import something, if it has a different size than my video, I would have to come to Effect Controls and scale it back up. Now, in order to not have to do that, I can go into Premiere's settings by clicking Command comma on macOS, or by going into Premiere and clicking Settings. Then inside of Media, I can set the default media scaling to set to frame size. Make sure it's not scale to frame size. When I do that, every time that I import an image that has a different size than my sequence, Premiere will automatically adjust the scale so that it fits the entire screen. This is really useful, especially if you're going to import a lot of things into your sequence, like images or stock videos. Anyway, let's delete this butter here and enable the previous butter, which has a higher resolution, and let's animate it appearing on the screen. So first things first, I want it to be smaller, so I'll decrease the scale, and I want it to end up somewhere here on the screen so that it doesn't cover any of those letters. So what I'll do now is save the position of my butter by adding a keyframe. This is where I want my butter to end up once the animation finishes. And now I'll come to the beginning of this clip and say that I want my butter to come in from the bottom. So right here, I want to add another keyframe and drag my vertical position to the right so that the butter goes down. So now the position of the butter is this number, which is down here somewhere. And as the video will play, the butter will slowly come up until it reaches this vertical position, which is right here on the screen. Let's see how it looks like. This will make everything on your screen buttery smooth. Here at the end, I'll just trim the butter clip and I have my butter animation. One more thing that I can do to make this animation buttery smooth is right click on the right keyframe, go into temporal interpolation and choose ease in, and then right click on the first keyframe, go to the same place and choose ease out. You can see that these keyframes now changed their shape, and essentially what this means is that the animation will not start abruptly. It will start off slow, then become faster and faster, and then slow down at the end. This is before. This will make everything on your screen, and this is after. This will make everything on your screen more buttery smooth. Now, one more thing that I might want to do is, as the butter is coming up on the screen, I might want to blur the background to move the focus onto the butter. So let's try to do that. Let's come to the beginning of this clip, and as the butter is coming over, here I want to start blurring this clip. But inside of Effect Controls, you'll notice that there is no option for blur, and that's because blur is an effect. You can find effects inside of Premiere in the Effects group. Here you'll find a bunch of video and audio effects. So in the search field, I'll type in blur, and here under video effects, I'll be able to find Gaussian blur. To apply an effect, I can pick it up with my mouse and drag it onto the clip that I want to apply it to. In this case, I want to apply it to this effect. So I'll release my mouse and you can immediately see that Gaussian blur appeared inside of my effect controls, but nothing became blurry. Very suspicious. Once you add an effect onto a clip, it just adds it inside of your effect controls. And to see the effect, you also need to enable it or control it. So right now, inside of the Gaussian blur effect group, it says that the blurriness is equal to 0. That's why the video isn't blurred. But if I increase this to something like 50%, you can see that it's blurred a lot. But now if I leave it like this, the entire clip is blurred. That's not what I want. I want it to start not blurry, and as the butter is coming up on the screen, I want it to gradually blur. So what I can do, you guessed it, is use keyframes. I'm going to reset the blur back to 0, come to the beginning of my clip, and add a keyframe for blurriness. Then I'll move to the right once the butter starts appearing, and I'll move this keyframe over here. So now at this part of the clip, the blur will be 0. Now the butter started appearing on the screen, so I'll move to the right until the animation almost finishes, and I'll add another keyframe and say that at this point I want the blur to be something like 11. Now at the beginning the blur will be 0 until my playhead reaches the first keyframe, then it will transition from 0 to 11, and then it will continue being 11 for the rest of this clip, unless I add another keyframe and change the value. This will make everything on your screen buttery smooth. Beautiful. Okay, I think now the video is ready, but not the audio. You probably already noticed that on the right, there are these audio meters. And when the video plays, it shows how loud the audio is. But if I come here and extend this just a little bit, it will show me the loudness in decibels. Refresh rate on Windows, you right click and choose this. Now, generally, I want my audio to be in between -3 and -9. And right now it's somewhere around -18. So I want to boost up the volume of this audio. One very easy way I can do that in Premiere is simply select all of my audio clips. I held Option while selecting because if I select like this, it will also select the video parts. And that's because these clips are linked. If you zoom in, you can see this little V here, which indicates that a clip is linked, which means that if I want to move this clip, it will move both the audio and the video. This is useful so that the audio and the video don't go out of sync. That's why they're linked. If you want to unlink, you can select both of them and click Command or Control L on Windows and it will unlink. Now I can select and move the video separately without the audio. I'm going to undo that and move the clip back into its place. So if I want to keep the clips linked but select only the audio or the video, I can hold Option or Alt and select. So to normalize this audio, I'm going to select this, then go up into Window and look for the Essential Sound panel. Premiere already detected that my audio is dialogue, but I'm going to clear this audio type for now and I'm going to tag this audio myself. So I'm going to say that all of these clips is dialogue. And here inside of the Essential Sound panel, there are a bunch of different things that you can do for your audio. Like inside of Repair, you can reduce noise. But what I'm looking for is loudness. Inside of loudness, I'm going to click Auto Match and you can see how my audio became a lot louder. Let's see what the audio levels are now. Boom, in order to change your screen's refresh rate on Windows, you right click and choose Display Settings. Then it's somewhere around -6 and -14, which is a little far apart for my liking. So another effect that I'm going to apply is called Dynamics. This is essentially a compressor that makes the quieter parts of my voice louder and louder parts quieter. So it sort of squeezes the audio together to make sure it's not as dynamic. Boom, in order to change your screen's refresh rate on Windows, you right click and choose Display Settings. Then you go into Advanced Display and here under Choose a Refresh Rate. Now I want it to still be a little louder and I can either do it with this slider here, just increase it. Then you go into Advanced Display and here under, or I can do it slightly differently. I'm going to close the Essential Sound panel, then zoom in. And here there's this bar here that I can simply drag up to increase the volume of my clip. Boom, in order to change your screen's, that was a little too loud. And these two red squares appeared over here, which means that my audio is now clipping. It reaches the maximum amount, which is something that you don't want. So I'll decrease the volume to something like 2.8. Boom, in order to change your screen's refresh rate on Windows, you right click and choose Display Settings. And now my audio is in between -3 and -12. But since I only increased audio for this clip, the audio on these two clips still stayed default. So I'm going to select this audio clip by holding Option, so I don't select the video as well. Right click and choose Copy, and then select both of these. Right click and paste attributes so that I can paste my volume. And now the volume of all of them is the same. Now, before we go in and try to export this video, I want to mention a few miscellaneous things. The way Premiere works is it doesn't copy these files into the project. The files and the project are separate. So for example, if I come into my desktop and delete this second butter and then go back into Premiere, it's going to say, whoa, where's that clip? Please link it again. And I have a few choices, either to locate this clip on my computer or say offline to let Premiere know that I deleted this clip and that it doesn't need to be here. Now inside of my project panel, I can see a question mark next to butter 2 because Premiere doesn't know what this is and I can delete it. However, if I move this butter, the actual high resolution butter elsewhere on my computer, I'll create a new folder, name it butter, and then move it inside here. And then if I come back to Premiere, it actually found it, which I didn't expect. But if I move it somewhere else on my computer, it's not going to be able to find it and it's going to ask you to locate it. You'll be able to click locate and browse your computer to tell Premiere where that file is. I'm mentioning this because most beginner editors, like me over here, like to keep their files across many different places on their computer, for example, their desktop, and once they finish a project, they move these files somewhere else. But then if they return to the project and try to change something, they're going to see this red scream of of doom everywhere, which basically means that Premiere doesn't know what this butter is. So in order to not have to go through the trouble of relinking your media every time you open an old project, it's a good practice to create a new folder for every project that you work on. For example, I'll say this is my first video and it's called refresh rate. Now I can move all of my files like butter and the screen recording and even the Premiere project itself in there, and the next time I want to work on this project, I can just go into that folder and everything will be in here. Okay, so let's get this video out of Premiere and onto our computer. I'll go into the export tab at the top, and this is where I'll be able to export my video. Now here Premiere shows me the source and the output. The source is the video that's currently on my timeline, and the output is what we're going to get after we export this video. You can see that my sequence is in 1080p resolution, but for some reason Premiere wants to export this in 4K resolution and at a different frame rate. That's because I used this preset before and now it's automatically applied. And most often you want your source to be the same as your output. So inside of the video tab, I'm going to click match source, which means that the output will match the source. Now my source is 1080p and my output will also be 1080p. My FPS is 30 FPS and my output is the same. And if you're exporting this video for YouTube, there are a few settings to change. First, I always disable metadata, and then for the video to have the best audio settings for YouTube, you can go into effects and under here choose loudness normalization. We're going to use settings that YouTube recommends. So first, let's set the loudness standard to ITU BS. Okay, then the target loudness to -14, tolerance to 0, and max true peak level to -1. These are the best audio settings for YouTube. Next, I can go up here, collapse my effects, and at the bottom right, click export, which will export my video, probably on the desktop because I forgot to choose the other location. Yes, in the location here, you can click the location and choose a different location if that's what you want. So if I close out of Premiere, I'll be able to find my video on my desktop. Boom, in order to change your screen's refresh rate on Windows, you right click and choose display settings, then you go into advanced display, and here under choose a refresh rate, you choose the highest one possible. This will make everything on your screen buttery smooth. Beautiful. Now before you go, if you're interested in learning how to apply the things I know about YouTube to your channel and get results like this, I made a template that essentially lays out the entire YouTube blueprint of how to win. By the way, it's free. Most templates like this are thrown together as an afterthought, but this one has gone through many iterations of trimming out the fat to ensure it's as dense with value as possible. It'll teach you everything you need to know to kickstart your channel, from finding your niche and standing out, to creating thumbnails and titles, growing past 1,000 subscribers, making money, forging an unstoppable mindset, and a lot more. But it's only for channels that are serious. It's not some feel-good fluff to passively consume, and it's not some magic bullet either. It's for people that are ready to commit and do the work. You can get it from the link in the description. I hope you found this video helpful or interesting in some way, and I'll see you in the next one.